out of order, but so NewView has 4 lines of business. One you're very familiar with, which is our community organizing. So one of the things that we do there is our community stewards program. We also do, you can go to the next slide there, Francisco. We also do a lot of housing services, housing and financial services. We're helping people buying homes. We're also helping people stay in their homes, whether they're facing foreclosure or maybe they're seeing a lot of eviction going on as well. So we're helping people stay in their homes if they might be facing eviction. Maybe they're behind on a utility bill or something like that. So we're helping them out. And we also do financial coaching to help people plan better. Our third line of business that we do is small business technical assistance. Oh, here we go. I didn't do them quite in the right order, but there we go. Those are our 4 lines of business: is small business development, small business technical assistance. We can go to the next slide there, Francisco. So this is our first time home buyers. So in 2023, we're hitting the market that we want, which is anybody can take our courses, but we really want to help people who might not be able to buy a home be able to learn to buy a home. So about 64, 2/3 of the folks that we helped earned less than 100% of the area median income. And last year, just under half were people of color. So both of the areas that we're targeting, and Madeline and Brenda are the folks who perform that service, as well as all the other things. Next slide. Our small business technical assistance has spent a lot of time working to help grow, create jobs all throughout the region, but Fitchburg has been particularly a focus for us for the past little while. So we've helped, you can see we helped Rise and Grind, we help AM Events. If you go to the next slide, we've also helped Dario's as well. But many of the businesses up along Main Street, up and down Main Street, have been received technical assistance from us. Sometimes it's just putting together a plan so they can go take it to the bank and get a loan. Sometimes it's just to make sure they're making a mistake on paper. Nothing worse than investing, a couple $100,000 and then find out you didn't think of something, you can't get a permit, who knows what it is. And now you're, some of us have been in that situation where you think you're ready to go on something and you're really not. And so we want to help people make mistakes on paper. Go ahead, next slide, Francisco. So here's our community organizing. Here, as a community development corporation, we believe that development should be done with people, not to people. And that's part of what our community organizing does, is to help people lead the cities, regions, towns in the direction that they want to go. So last year we had 165 stewards graduate. You can see on the bottom there, our childcare stewards. And many of these ideas have come from folks just like yourself who have said, oh, this is something I would really like to do. I have an interest in this, and let's see what we can make happen. So the art stewards actually came from that as well. We were doing the Fitchburg arts community, but I can tell you I am not an artist. But there are a lot of people who did know something about art, and they came together to make something happen. And even standing here in this building, it's not because of NewView, it's really because of people like yourselves who said, how can we make something happen here? And what we're trying to do is just say, yes, this is a good way. This is an area where regular people, just like yourselves, can be leading. And so we're very excited to have that happen. And like I said, some of these are ideas that really, really take off. Others, it may just be an idea that somebody has that they do something and they don't always have to have as much success as the art stewards have to have all these people here. And that's part of what we want to do, is encourage people to experiment and encourage people to lead and to try their own things. So some of them will really take off. Of course, those are the ones we talk about. But really, if you have an idea, talk to Francisco, talk to Nash, because we never know which of the ideas that are going to work and which are the ones that aren't. And so much of it is generated by your own thoughts. So that's what we're really encouraging here, because all we know is that we do not have all the answers. Next slide. I think you missed a couple slides, Francisco. Could you go back? Yes, could you go back one more?
There we go.
So we're building 68 apartments. And so one of the things that's really important for you to know is what's happening in the housing market. And I think these two slides really show it. You can see the slide on the left. This is for single family home prices. And you could just see how much they've gone up. There's a line there for Fitchburg, which blue.
The blue line, yeah.
So it's gone from under 250,000 to over 350,000 in the last 5 years. And you can also see the sales lines. I guess the colors don't quite, they do match up. So you can see that sales line for Fitchburg, there's a lot less homes being sold. And so that's making it much harder for people to buy their first home. And we're definitely seeing that. So interest rates are up, inventory is down. In some ways, it's made it really, really hard for first-time home buyers. So Madeline and Brenda are working twice as hard to help people get into a home. And some of that is because of the pandemic, just so many different things happen. So some of that is that now some of you are living here, and instead of driving to Boston 5 days a week, you have to only drive to Boston 2 or 3 days a week. So that makes living out here much easier to do, which means that the homes are more valuable. So that's driving up the price. That doesn't explain it all because prices in Boston are going up too. So, but that is one thing that we can see is happening here. If you go to the next slide. So this slide in some ways is even more dramatic. This is what's happening with rents. And you can see from about 2018 to 2021, rents basically stayed the same for most of the time that I've been around working here. Rents really haven't changed. They go up a little, they go down a little, they go up a little, they go down a little, until all of a sudden you can see what happened once that pandemic hit in 2021, 22, 23, 24. These slides are sort of lagging indicators because they're from the data set that we took them. So they're the real rents, if you went out there, are going to be behind these rents, but you can see the trend, which is what we wanted to show you. So you can see now, according to the HUD FMRs, the HUD fair market rents, it's a very technical term. A 2-bedroom apartment in Fitchburg and Leominster is now about almost $1,600. And back in 2018, it was about $1,085. So see a really big difference. And this just shows the percentage increase. And again, that's due to the, well, I don't know why it's happened since the pandemic. We'll just leave it that way. And again, this is a trend that's happening all over, but particularly for our area, this is really very, very dramatic to see this large increase in prices. And the other thing you're not seeing is you're not seeing a decrease in prices. Typically what would happen in our area is prices would go up, the real estate bubble would hit, and then the real estate bubble would fall. And our homes in our areas would be the last ones to have that price rise because we're far enough away from Boston, and the first ones to have the prices sink. And we're not seeing that now. Whether that will happen again, that somebody else can answer that question, not me, but we haven't seen it yet. So the need for the housing that we're bringing online is greater than what we've seen in a really, really long time. And I just wanted to, as we're talking about 68 apartments, give you the context of what's really going out there as far as rents go and costs go. It's super hard right now to build housing as well, because just like these costs are going up, all of our costs are going up on the construction side. So it costs us more, the utilities cost us more, the insurance costs us more, everything costs more. So it's Steve and Ann and that team are facing a lot of headwinds to both fund the project and to bring it in on time. So I'm going to come back at the end. I'm going to turn it over to Steve. If there are any questions, I can take them now, but if they're about Fitchburg Arts, wait for Steve.
I'm just curious, are those charts available online or something? Because it's a little bit hard to read, but I do see.
The charts aren't there, but the HUD fair market rents are, you can just look at the HUD fair market rents, and all I did was just plot them on a graph there. And like I said, they're sort of a lagging indicator. So if you went on Zillow or something, they're going to give you a different number. But it's, again, we're trying to show the trends, not so much what the actual rents are. Yes.
off the wall here, but I've been wondering for some time. They've been projecting what's going to happen with people start to move around, there's climate change issues. Like, because imagine that places like Central Mass actually is going to become a bit of a climate haven in comparison to some other places. With some of the coast, places in the south. I just wondering if
I will say the state is, I haven't seen studies about that. I'm sure that somebody has done it. I will say the state is really pushing us to make all of our all of our buildings as climate resistant as possible. So we made, Steve can maybe talk about this, but we made changes as we were going through to make our building be more climate resilient. And it's something that we're pushing for all of our projects now, because we not only do we not want the electricity to go out, but we don't want it to be flooded. We don't want, we want all our residents to be safe, and the more climate resistant we can make them, cooler in the summer just by the way we build them, warmer in the winter, less prone to flooding, all of those things are really, really helpful. And it makes it easier for us to manage the buildings as well. If the electricity goes out, then all of a sudden there's no elevators. Now, what do you do with people? How do people get up and down the stairs? All sorts of things now are electronic. Some keys are whatever. There's all these issues that happen when the power goes off. So we're really doing our best to make all the buildings as resilient and as we can.
The Huey administration passed some new housing bills. Is that something you've looked at and hope to take advantage of? Or
yes, they haven't passed them yet. They proposed them. The legislature is still working on them, but some of those bills are really, really helpful. Part of what they're trying to do with that is to just Ellen and I were talking about how this project took 10 years. Part of why it took 10 years was you got to go through the funding queue. And so what we're hopeful is that with this new funding, some of these projects can just move a little bit faster, because part of what takes so long is you start off, you're all ready to go, and then you don't have the funding. Then you have to sort of start all over again, because the prices that you got last year, even if it wasn't this crazy time, aren't any good for this year. And the person that you thought could do the work can't necessarily do the work anymore. Maybe they're busy now, so you have to find another contractor. So having those, being able to time that stuff out is really, really helpful. They're also doing some terrific stuff, not only on creating more money, but creating different types of funds that can help address some of the different needs that we have for our housing.
How about utilities? Is that something that affects the tenants also? And I'm a new arrival here in Massachusetts, but the idea of these monopolies of the Unitil here is crazy. Is there anybody working on that aspect of it?
I think there's a new project there for one of our stewards to take on. Yes, we would love to do something about that. But it's, that's gonna, what we're trying to do at our level is build the buildings so that they are heated and cooled in the most energy efficient manner possible. So that's something that we have control over. What to do about the rates and all the rest of that stuff. I wouldn't say it's not us, it's that it's a really, really hard problem, right? It's not just about political will. Some of it's political will, but some of it's also markets and economics, and being able to sift through what's markets and economics and what's politics. How much is this is just Unitil or any utility company flexing their muscle versus how much is it really is very expensive for them to deliver these power, and what do they do? I've gone to a few seminars about it, and I can tell you it's super complicated, and but there's definitely a political piece to it, but it's not all politics. But it is something we're trying to do with all of our buildings by making them more energy efficient so that tenants don't have, and us too, as an owner, because we pay for a lot of the costs of that as well. Okay, if not, I'll turn it over to Steve, who can talk about the Fitchburg Arts Community Project itself. And then I'll be back at the end because I want to put Fitchburg Arts Community in sort of even a bigger picture than what it is.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me and thanks for being patient on this project. So we are really, really excited about being able to report that, this project is now 50% complete. The construction is 50% complete, and it's a huge milestone for us and for the community. Because as Mark said, we started visioning this project over 10 years ago, and to have the construction be 50% complete is really, really exciting. And Francisco, you can leave that slide up for now, and then I'll have you walk through some of the other slides. But I wanted to update people because people have been asking, if we're, interested in living in Fitchburg Arts Community, when is all that process going to start? Well, it's started now. I mean, I'm going to go through a timeline of, what the next steps are if you're interested in living at Fitchburg Arts. And the first step is we launched an online survey, and you can access that through NewView's website. And that survey asks you some, just a handful of questions if you're interested in living at Fitchburg Arts or just getting information about it. So that survey is live now. We will very shortly, within a week or two, have a pre-application for people that are interested in living at Fitchburg Arts Community. We are now outreaching to artists throughout the community and throughout the region to, get people interested in living in Fitchburg Arts Community. We have an info session regarding the lottery process scheduled for June. We don't have a date yet, but that will happen in June. The pre-application that I talked about, that'll be available in a couple of weeks. People will have to get those pre-applications completed by July, because in August we'll have a lottery, and this lottery process is part of our funders require us to have a lottery so that the process is fair to everybody that is interested in living there. And it's literally a lottery where we draw numbers, and it's a random situation where we draw numbers and people are assigned a number, and that determines whether they get an apartment, and it's literally a lottery system. This project, for many of the units, is artist preference. So we want to have a critical mass of artists, but you don't have to be an artist to live there. But there is a preference for artists, and that comes into that lottery process as well. So the lottery will happen in August, and then from sort of July to October, our property management company will be qualifying residents, based on income and credit and family size. And then the most exciting piece of all this is that, in January of 2025, people will start being able to move in to the new apartments. And that lease up process is going to be, anywhere from 4 to 5 months. So the lease up will happen between January and April of 2025. So that's sort of an outline of sort of the next steps for people that are interested in living at Fitchburg Arts. And if you want more information about the project and that process, you can go on NewView's website, and there's a page for Fitchburg Arts Community, and there are links to all of the different things that I talked about, the survey to express an interest in the project, and by filling out that survey, we'll continue to update you on, events that are happening, and, when the applications are due and all of that. So you should really go on to our website and fill out that survey, so that you'll be in our database so that we can continue to update you. The next thing that I want to do, because everybody doesn't necessarily know all of the details of this project, I want to walk through, what, how many apartments are going to be here. Mark indicated, this is a 68 apartment complex. So there'll be 68 units. There's going to be a mix of bedroom sizes. So there's one studio apartment, and then there are 24 one-bedroom apartments, and then there's 36 two-bedroom apartments, and then there'll be 7 three-bedroom apartments. And those are scattered, across the 3 buildings, the BF Brown School, the stables, and the annex. So BF Brown has 49 units. That's the largest building. The stables will have 7 apartments, and the annex will have 12 apartments. Of the 68 apartments, 47 of the apartments will be affordable, and they're going to be affordable to a various range of incomes. And Mark talked a little bit about, the incomes and how we look at that. So 14 of the apartments will be available to families that are at or below 30% of the median income. 2 of the apartments will be available to families that are at or below 50% of the median income. And then 21 apartments will be for families that are below 60% of the median income. So those are all units that will be affordable. There's also 21 apartments that are considered workforce apartments, and those are intended to reach people that are between 80% and 110% of median income. The project, it's not just housing, it's housing for artists. And, we will also have space within the building for artists to do their work and to show their work. So there'll be artist studio space, there'll be workspace, there'll be gallery space. So Francisco, if you want to move through the slides, and next slide. So right there, so this is an artist rendering of the interior of the auditorium space. So this is going to be the largest space that will be available for artists, and it's intentionally left wide open because it was the former auditorium of the school. And you can see the large windows at the back of the auditorium is the what was the balcony to the auditorium, and that's also going to be space for artists to show their work, to make their work. So this is a very large space. It's close to 4,000 square feet, and it's going to be, left as open space for artists that live, at Fitchburg Arts Community to make their work and to make their art. So this is a really exciting piece to the project. If you go to the next slide, Francisco. This is the lobby that was, if you knew the old BF Brown School, this is the lobby that was in between the auditorium and the gymnasium. So this is also going to be sort of an open space that, there can be small performances, art can be displayed here, sculpture or whatever in this space. And this is, this is space that will look just like it did when it was, when it was the school. If you go to the next slide, Francisco. So these floor plans are color coded, and this is the lowest level of the building. And so all of the areas that are colored in yellow are the apartments. The spaces that are colored in pink are community space, so that large section of pink area, sort of right in the middle. That's going to be a large community room for people to just gather, if they want to have a meeting or a presentation or a class, they can use that space. The green area is the management office, so there'll be on-site property management, at the building. The other pink spaces are, other community spaces. There's, laundry, tenant storage, bike storage. If you go to the next slide, Francisco, the next slide is the main floor of the building, and the areas that are kind of in the orangish salmon color. That large space at the lowest part, that's the former auditorium that will be the largest amount of artist workspace. The pink areas are also other community space. Again, the yellow is the apartments. If you go to the next slide, Francisco. Again, so the areas that are in the salmon or orange color, that's the balcony of the auditorium. And then there's still, some other sort of classroom space that's in the pink. And then one more slide. And this is the top floor, which is actually the fourth floor if we're counting the lowest level. And mainly that's the remainder of the apartments. There's two small spaces that are in that orangish color that are just sort of unprogrammed, undesignated space, but are used, can be used by artists. So do people have questions at this point? I can stop and allow people to ask questions. I think we also want to hear from people and from artists to let us know what kind of programming they think would be important, for this development once it's, fully occupied, and also what type of, equipment and amenities and furniture, we should be considering, for the artist workspaces. So again, I'll open it up to discussion and questions.
Can we go back to the auditorium slide?
Yeah,
What happened to the stage?
the stage is at the back, so what you can't see that because it's that's where
Right
the
here.
Yeah,
where the photograph is.
is it just still a stage, or is it being divided into spaces?
No, so it is not going to be a stage, because the main floor of the auditorium is, I mean, the stage will still be there, but it won't be necessarily for like performing arts or anything like that, because the intention of this open space is not to have it be a performing theater, because we're not zoned for that. So, but it is zoned for, open, sort of community space. But the stage space will be there, and it can be used as a studio, but it is not programmed as sort of a performing stage.
There are a lot of other stages here.
Correct.
I mean, we have a lot of community theater, and we also have Fitchburg State University is building a whole theater. So we felt like creating performing space was not, that was not going to be necessarily a need given the theater and all the other community theater that we have already.
But is there any space in there that can be rehearsal for dance or any other kind of performing art?
That stage space could be used for rehearsal space. Yes, we are proposing to, Francisco, if you go back to the plans, those color-coded plans, I think it's oh.
And while we're waiting, while Francisco's doing that, I just want to acknowledge our friends here from the Fitchburg Art Museum. I think there's 3 of you here, 1 online and 2 here. So this project wouldn't have happened without the Fitchburg Art Museum because the state they don't want to just create artist housing. They want to create artist housing where there really is something there already. And being across the street from the Fitchburg Art Museum gave us clear, and having a memorandum about understanding with the Fitchburg Art Museum. We don't know anything about art. We're a community development corporation. And so it's great to have a partner that actually knows something about art and that has served as one of the anchor institutions in Fitchburg for you guys over 100 years older or just about to be 100 years old, something like that. So a long time. And so having that, it's just another example of sort of being able to take advantage of the assets that we really do have in the community. And that was one of the reasons why we proposed artist housing, was because we had a great partner in the Fitchburg Art Museum. And if the art museum didn't want to do it, I can tell you it wouldn't have happened.
Francisco, go to the next slide, please.
Over here.
Yeah, so
yeah, answering the last question.
So I just wanted to so the that pink rectangle at the far right-hand side, sort of behind the balcony, that is, it's not labeled correctly now, but that is going to be a soundproof studio. So it'll be a place where musicians can rehearse, you know, other people that need sort of soundproof, you know, if you're doing recording or anything like that. So that is something that people had indicated previously was something that they wanted to see. So that space, you know, will be soundproof. It's in a place that is not immediately adjacent to residential apartments. And, you know, we're going to do what we can do to, you know, make it as soundproof as possible with insulation and special ways to hang the drywall. So that is one very specific, you know, space that is going to be built. And, you know, again, people have other questions?
Yeah.
I had a little bit of input on one of the spaces on the makerspace. My name is Jessica. I'm a Fitchburg art student. I'm no longer in Fitchburg, but I'm very interested in this project. Ventilation, like a makerspace that is actually an enclosed space, spray paint, epoxies, stuff that is going to give off an extensive smell that artists like to do. We like to work with things that are smelly sometimes. What do you have a space that is specially designed or in your blueprint that you would have specific ventilation and would suck it, you know, suck that air out?
So there is, you know, complete ventilation throughout the building, you know, for all the residential apartments. And then also, you know, there's, you know, constant ventilation in the large auditorium space. But, you know, as far as some of the smaller spaces for work that you're talking about, no, there is not specific, you know, ventilation that would accommodate that.
That may be something that as artists, it may become an issue. Those smells will linger. Spray paint in itself is just like really smelly, and but it lingers. So there's like a ventilation. It sucks that air out. Like it's a high powered suction that not just your regular ventilation, because you don't want it going throughout the building.
Yeah, no, and there is, I mean, it within the spaces that would be workspaces, there is, you know, very good ventilation, you know, and it's not just like, you know, an exhaust fan in your bathroom or your kitchen. It's, you know, it's a complete ERV ventilation system. but it may not be specific for, you know, spray paints and that kind of thing.
Dylan, I know you have a question, but can I just tag, just as at Main Street Studio, well, because we deal with the university, so. Anyway, but I know that we have a list of chemicals that we are allowed to use here and not use here. Is that gonna be something as you develop policies for this space that all artists are gonna have to let you know what their materials are, and if, does it go through a vetting process as to what they can and can't use?
Yeah, we haven't thought through that, but you know, I think that is a good question, and I think, you know, as you know, people move in and, you know, are eligible to move in, I think those are, you know, some of the things that we're going to have to develop. You know, we have, you know, planned for, you know, special sinks. If you, Francisco, if you go back to the slide prior to this one, if you can. So in the auditorium, those pink areas are 2 restrooms in the large auditorium, and then there's sort of slop sink areas that will be able to accommodate chemicals and alike, you know, in that sink area. So we've thought about at least some of those types of issues. But again, you know, there are probably certain chemicals that you cannot put down those sinks. So you know, I think that is something that we're going to have to address.
I was gonna ask about sinks.
Oh.
If there was something.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I was just curious, because this is gonna be more a working community, not just a regular apartment complex, and it's gonna be a certain amount of cooperation and such required, right? So what kind of management / governance is gonna be in place? Is as much as possible going to be turned over to the occupants, or is that what the manager's office is all about? And how are we gonna keep this from descending into northern farms?
Did you hear that, Steve?
I heard most of it, and I think, you know, again, I think some of this is going to be, you know, we're gonna develop these things as, you know, as we move forward. You know, there will clearly be, you know, a say by the residents that live there, but there are certain legal and zoning things that we can't do in this building. Like, you know, one of the things, you know, it is not zoned for, you know, for large performances. So hence that's why we didn't, you know, redevelop the stage as a stage for performing, because, you know, the code doesn't allow, you know, 150 seat auditorium, you know, within a residential building like this. So there are certain things that we just can't do, you know, by law. So you know, I think, you know, property management will sort of guide some of that stuff, but I think we really want the residents that live there to, you know, decide how they want to, you know, have things run within reason. You know, I mean, we can't, you know, be breaking the law or be breaking codes and that kind of thing. But I think, you know, we definitely want to have, you know, all the residents there have a say in, you know, what is programmed here, you know, what, you know, I mean, some other, you know, artist communities and artist housing, you know, have open studios once a month, or, you know, once a quarter or whatever. We want, you know, we want the artists to make that decision as to how that works. You know, we can't dictate that, nor can our property management company do that. So you know, those are the types of things that we really want input on, because that's what's going to make it, you know, a vibrant artist community, is to have programming like that, you know, to have open studio, to, you know, have a place where the artists can display their art and have the general public come in and see it. You know, I don't think we can have it be open to the public all the time, because again, I think some of it is dictated by code and requirements, but you can clearly have, permits to have open studios, on a somewhat of a regular basis. So, I mean, that's just an example of, what I sort of think about.
To get to your question about Lord of the Flies, so we visited a lot of places around the country and talked to them. So I think it's pretty, obviously the management company is going to say who gets, they're going to be running the basics of what it is, making sure people pay their rent. If we have to evict somebody, all the things that you would do in any other property, that's what the management company is going to do. If you have a complaint about your fixing something, the management company is going to take care of those things. And what we've seen from the other places that we've gone to is artists really create the culture of who's living there. And that's what we're trying to do. That's why we're partnering with the Fitchburg Art Museum. Not only did we go visit a whole bunch of places, but Nick went and visited a bunch of artist communities as well, so that we've seen how it works. And that's the key that we're trying to get, is that culture within the confines of what we're building. And yeah, there's lots of them out there. ArtSpace has done a lot of them. We've talked to some of that, I think, is stuff that we've just gone and spoken to people. So, we went to Rhode Island and Connecticut, and there's not a lot in Massachusetts that has this type of funding, but we've been to the ones in Massachusetts too, in New York, and we've seen what they're doing in Maryland as well. We've seen what they're doing, so we have a sense about how to make those things work.
I had a close enough question,
I just would like, well, it's a two-part question. One, could I have a little bit more clarity on when I see arts, I see it as a big umbrella of many other subcategories. So what is this main space, workshop space, is the envisioned type of demographic for artists? Because there's just, from my mind, it just goes. So for instance, if someone was a woodworker and worked with wood, that requires a certain amount of machinery. So where would something like that fit in? Because that would also fall in line with the question asked about ventilation, but then that also brings up sound. And if it's in this big open space and someone's trying to work on something very intricate, with the way my artist mind works, that's a big distraction. So I'm just trying to get a better scope of something like that.
You hear that one, Steve? It's a good one for you to answer.
Well, I don't have an answer for it, but I can say that, again, we're open to, trying to figure out whatever, I think it really comes down to, who's living here, right? Because we can't design for a wood shop if we do that and no woodworkers are living here, then how do we balance that? So I think it's really going to come down to, once artists, have been qualified and, have signed a lease, then, we can try to figure out, how to accommodate them. But that's the best answer that I can give at this point.
Getting to another part of what you said, I think we're trying to define art as very broadly.
Yeah.
Is what we're trying to do. And I do think there are a few arts, metalworking, woodworking. There are a few that are just much more, take a lot more sophisticated equipment, HVAC, all the rest of those things. So those are definitely harder for us to do, no question about it. The ones that are, a writer, we can handle that one pretty easily, right? They can just sit down and write. And I think they go on a continuum, and that's what we're trying to balance out. That's what we've seen from other places, and so that's that balance that we're trying to do, and that's why we're working with the Fitchburg Art Museum. So it could also be that some of these places, it might be that you go one place for your noisy whatever, and then you can bring it back to do the things that aren't quite as invasive to or distracting to everybody else. So I do think that's a little bit, I do think that's a little bit of sort of a chicken and egg type thing, where it's very hard to say, okay, great, we want to put a metal shop in, And whoops, well, there's nobody that wants to work in metal. How do
Right.
we handle that? We have a whole bunch of questions here in the room, so we'll go this way. Leah?
Business. Um,
So Steve, the question that I know you can answer is, how are we handling parking? Are meters coming in, and what happens for residents and visitors?
So there's, there is, there are 93 parking spaces on site. There are not meters. We typically do not designate, you know, assign parking, we don't number the parking spaces and assign them on our other developments. So, but it's, it's for, the parking is for residents only, and visitors, obviously. There's also on-street parking, if there isn't enough space for visitors. But, we have 93 spaces for 68 apartments. And, we've looked at, our other developments, and the city and the towns typically require a lot more parking than we actually use. So for our building on 470 Main Street and our two buildings in Leominster, which are, 40-unit developments, that's sort of how we manage the parking now, but there are not meters, there are not, designated spaces, and if people are illegally parking, people that don't live there, then we'll tow the vehicles, that's something that our property management will have to deal with. But, there's not a gate, and to get into the parking lot, the parking lot will be open. But it's, we deal with it and manage it in our other buildings, and we'll manage it sort of the same way. There'll probably be, you would be required to have, a sticker or something on your vehicle that says that you're supposed to be parking there, but, there's not going to be a gate, and controlled access in and out of the site. It'll be, the spaces will be there for both residents that live there and for visitors that come.
Just coming back to the climate resilience question that people asked. One of the worst things in the world is to just build lots of parking and just have it be sitting there asphalt. It heats up in the summer. It's expensive to build. It takes away green space. And so I think you're seeing many, many more entities trying to create the parking that you really need. And clearly, if we do open studios, we're not going to have enough parking for everybody, but that's however many times a year. So we don't want parking for all those things. Just like when you have civic days or trick or treat on Main Street here in downtown Fitchburg, you want people to have to walk a little bit. You wouldn't want to have all that parking sitting here and have it look like a ghost town, right? It'd be like, back in the old days when you used to go to the Seaport District in Boston, right? You just walk through those acres of parking lot when you were trying to get to whatever it is you were trying to do back then. It just doesn't make any sense. So I think this is something that we really push for, both for the climate and because that's what we needed. And we are creating also 16 spots for, I think it's 16.
16.
Yeah, for the low park. So those spaces will be designated for people to be able to use the park, which we also think is very good, helps the city and will help reduce some of the traffic, getting people off the streets to just be able to park there too.
And I think also related to the parking, if it's for special events like, an open studio or, a performance in that lobby space, a small performance, hopefully we can, make arrangements, with Workers Credit Union who doesn't use their parking in the evenings and weekends and alike, so I think that those are some of the things that we'll do to try to, deal with parking for special events like open studio or whatever. So, I think that's the collaboration that we're hoping to, accomplish, for those special events that need the extra parking.
I think we're going around this way, Hal, I'll come back to you. I don't remember who you next. Okay, go ahead.
Have you taken into plans for where they're putting the snow?
Yes. There are designated snow spots on there.
Yeah.
I'll just answer that one.
I think part of it.
I want to get back to the policies for the people that live there. And in my view, that there are two tiers of policies. One would be the management policies, the zoning, the facilities management. That's one tier. But the second tier would have to do with the social structure, how decisions are made, how the group coalesces. And I hear clearly that you're very honorably not dictating that from the top down, so you don't have the answers now. I get that, okay? But you also said that you went and visited other similar sites. And I'm very surprised that other models haven't surfaced there that may be, we be proposed for consideration here.
That's a great idea. We'll go, we can ask them how they did it and bring those so that people then can think about it here, but also be organic about it.
That'd be a really useful thing to. Yeah.
I would say the piece that I would take away, and see if you can jump in if you want, was that artists want to do their own thing. So, you can create, you can say, here's how other people have done it, but for the each artist community was very different and unique. And there is something about people. It's not just the end product, it's the journey to get there. And that was the thing that we saw from the other places, that people wanted to create their own culture, and having a document that says, here's your culture. Yep, as I said, great idea. We can pass that along, but the main piece that I kept hearing, and I can tell you some of them really freaked me out. So we went to visit AS 220 in Rhode Island, for example. They talked about the way they got past, this isn't happening in our place, but the way they got past their building inspection was they had the artists go and paint over everything. And so that they couldn't see the exposed wires because they were covered. What were they covered with? Paint. That was all they were covered with. And that's how they created their culture, was sort of getting around the building inspection codes. Like, okay, that's not for us. We don't want to do that. But that was really what was really, really important to them. That was something that created their culture. This is a very different model. So, and we also saw, having enough art space that was big for people to be able to create something. We saw that in places where they didn't do that, it died. There was nothing there. There was no there for artists to be able to make something happen. So those are some of the lessons that I took from the places that we visited. And the third thing was having a partner like the art museum that would attract artists and would provide intellectual capital and would understand what artists need. Those are we thought that was why it's so important that we created an MOU with the art museum and had them sort of helping us to lead this process.
I just want to add one point here. I'm really drilling down, but I think that my concern is an understanding of how decisions are going to be made early. I mean, before, when people walk in the door, they know it's a majority rule, it's 2/3, or we're going to elect a president that's going to be our spokesperson or whatever. Like, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm not asking you to suggest it, but I'm just saying that the nature of the way that problems are approached and decisions are made, there's got to be a model for that somewhere.
Yeah, I would say there's probably a model that uses all of those things, right? Some are majority rules, some are consensus, and but it's a good point. I'll go, I can see what there is out there so people can have a sense, but I'm looking at Steve, but I don't think that we've said, oh, we're definitely going to have
I can just say that, I know there's another session coming up with Nick, and I think Nick has done a lot of talking to artists about it too. So I would just encourage everyone to, keep their questions also for further discussion with the future sessions of this. Because I think there are probably some other ideas out there, but I agree with Mark and Steve that they're also trying to have it be artist-led as much as possible.
I think we're going around with that. Sorry, Steve, did you have something else you want to add?
No,
I just he's had his hand up for a while, but I do have a question. If you want two things. Really it's one question. I think about artists I've talked to, and I guess I was kind of envisioning this as a way for an artist to affordably have a live space and then a studio of sorts. And I wonder about the things that artists put money out towards. I know you said that you're gonna wait to see what your demographics that lives there, but what about do you have the ability if they wanted a kiln or printing press? Because that's something that many artists can do sculpture, and then it's expensive to pay the fees to use the community film or a resource that would be available. And what about technology? And would you be making a budget resource center, like 3D printing or computers? Because if it's low income, then they're also that might be useful.
So I could take one part of it and then I'll let Steve take part of it. So I think the things that are easier for us to deal with are things that like technology and that don't require special HVAC and all sorts of safety and things like that. Those are the easier things I think for us to handle. I think the stuff like the kilns, the woodworking shops, the metal shops are much harder for us. Not saying one is possible and one's not possible. I'm just saying one is on the easier side because we just a lot more expensive to do the types of things that just a few people are going to use. Again, I guess if we said we're just doing a pottery studio, then obviously we put kilns in there. So, but that's in general what we do, and that's a great idea. And maybe one of the things that we could do, I know Steve asked early on about ideas for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So if you have idea of these are the things that would make a difference. I don't know where we are on our funding side, but we definitely have some money set aside for that. And it's also something that we could raise money for, might be able to raise money for. I didn't say we could, Steve. I didn't say we could. So
yeah.
we might, because those would be great ideas for stuff to be able for us to be able to say, okay, there's this much money, making it up $10, and here, maybe there's a way that the artist, once they move in, say, here's the stuff we're buying collectively. Maybe some of it is just stuff that we say, okay, we know there's going to be a lot of demand for X, Y, and Z, so we're just going to purchase them right from the beginning. So it could go both ways. And some of them are really hard, like computers, people abuse them, they break and all those things. So, so some of that is going to come back to, what type of resident structure there is.
When you're looking that model that this project after, or you're thinking of modeling after, like more people sketching, writing. Like I look at that community space and I don't see oil painters or the spray paint. I see more like clean, contained artwork that could be in the middle of the floor. But I when I talk to artists that are looking, I talk to a glass artist and many artists have messy practices for the planners.
This is one of the workspace, just a regular apartment.
Yeah.
Spare bedrooms.
I would say we see both of them. And I do think that the units themselves are, it is just a big space there, but I don't think that that's necessarily what's going to end up there. Steve, do you want to try to?
I'm really having a hard time hearing people talking from the room because so I didn't hear. most
So
of
the
question.
question comes back to artists are messy. So what are we doing with the big clean space in the middle of the auditorium? How come people get messy even if they're not doing something that requires special HVAC, but they're just messy, like they're an oil painter. So
Sure.
why don't you take that one, Steve?
So I think in the large space, people can be messy in there. I mean, they can also do work in their own apartment, right? So so I think, in the larger space, they can definitely be messy. Having special equipment is a different question, but if you're just talking about being messy, that's exactly why, we built in the sinks and the places to clean up within that space. So I think that you can definitely be messy. And, if, and again, it comes back to the governance, if people decide that they want to sort of partition off some of the auditorium space, that potentially could happen. It has to be sort of, temporary, partitions, and alike, but that could happen as well. But again, we're sort of waiting to see who is going to live here and what are the demands for the space and alike. But again, getting back to the messiness, I think in that large space, it can be messy. So
One of the things that we've seen before in some of the other places is we can't put a barrier up to the top of the ceiling. That's issues for us, but you could certainly create cubes that are high enough that they could even lock, so that you could have your stuff there. You wouldn't want to store your diamond ring or whatever, but you could have a workspace that could be yours, that could be locked, that could be locked, that it would be your space. It just wouldn't go all the way to the top of the ceiling, so that you'd still be getting light in, but you could create a mess and it could be your mess and you could clean it up when you were done with it. But to give people some sense of their own space inside that larger auditorium. And I don't recall what the rendering is, but that is definitely something that we've contemplated. Does that answer your question? And it's great that we're doing this, because now is the time we've sort of been like, we know about these things out there, and we've been focused on how do we raise all this money and build the building. And so this is the perfect time while we still have a bunch of time left to make sure that we're answering this stuff. And I'm glad Nick's coming next week, so he can really handle it. Just kidding.
So I have a lot of questions, maybe some big ones I didn't get answered, while we're here. So I know you said that it would be difficult or not as easy to do things like metal and glass, working and clay, etc. But do you have the zoning compliance permits and everything to make that happen?
We have to go through sort of permit. We have to go through each thing. The question, Steve, is for some of these messy, difficult things, are we permitted to do it? And I think the answer is it's a really case by case basis. Some of it's really at the building code level and just may not be a zoning issue, may just be, you have to put in, if you're putting in a kiln, you have to, I'm making it up here. You'd have to just make sure that the building's not going to catch on fire and you have enough ventilation. And that's not a zoning issue. That might just be how we're actually building it. So I don't know that we know the answers to that. Unless it's not, they're not all in the same bucket. In other words, some of them are a lot easier to do and some of them are a lot harder.
Secondly, are there going to be real pictures of the space of it built out and what's going to look like both the apartments and the open space before you still would want it, before you start determining who actually is covered?
So Steve, are there going to be, I know the answer to one of these, but I think you're better to answer it. Will people be able to see what an apartment looks like, and what about and will they be able to see what the studio looks like before they have to put an application in?
So there will be a model unit available in May. So that'll be before people actually have to get their applications in. As far as seeing the large studio space, the auditorium space, that will not be finished at that point. But we are, developing it as an open white box as possible, because again, we don't know what people are going to be interested in. So, we're building that space as generic as possible, is I think the best answer I can give.
But it's a good idea. Maybe there's a way we can get a better rendering of it or something like that so people can see what it looks like.
But I want to make time for other people, so I want to know, are you going to have more time for open forums, people to ask these questions and get more input in from them and from you, before this all, arises?
Yeah, I would say the answer is yes. I mean, we have art stewards. We're happy to come and maybe that's something we can put in, start working on. We have 3 people from the museum here. Maybe that's something we can start working on in addition to doing the recruiting, the outreach, but to start on that. I think it's again, as Steve said, it's a little bit tricky because we want the decision makers to be the people who live there. So the fact that somebody's super passionate and lives in Fitchburg or Leominster or whatever, but isn't going to move in, it's a little bit of a balancing act. But we definitely want to talk about it and create a community for people to be able to, for us to be able to build the best possible thing that we can. Because you're raising some great questions, some of which we've spent time thinking about, and some of which we haven't spent enough time thinking about yet.
Okay, so
So a question I have is, I guess, going back now to the lottery process and the identity of it as an artist. Bird, and I guess I'm trying to fully figure out how the game of chance and the artist identity would work together specifically.
Yep. So Steve, the question, and I think you can answer this one, is what does it mean to be artist preference housing? How does it work? I know you asked a different question, but I think he'll answer I think he'll be able to answer your question.
So, so the sort of the artist certification process will happen. We have not, fully finalized this process. So some of our funders and lenders are still giving us input, but but there will be sort of a fairly, worked out certification process. And, some of the things that, you'll need to do as an artist is, complete an application, submit a resume, give us a sample of work, and then there'll be an interview process. And there will be a committee that reviews all of the sort of artist certification stuff. And that committee will be made up of, somebody from the museum, local artists, maybe somebody from the university. So it'll be a blend of, people that will be part of that process. And, we're trying to set the definition of artist as broad as possible. So it isn't just painters, it isn't just sculptors, it's people that, work in various parts of, the art world. It could be an architect, you could be a designer, we're trying to keep that as broad as possible. And, we're trying to keep the process as fair as possible too, because it is artist preference. We're asking people that are artists that want to live here to go through that artist certification process first, then, and simultaneously, then you will fill out an application for the apartment, and our property manager will screen that application for, you know, for various things. They'll look at your income, they'll look at your family size, because you've got to meet certain criteria, you know, for, you know, different apartments. You know, they'll look at, you know, people's credit and their ability to pay their rent. So it's really a two-step process. The artist certification first to determine that you're an artist, and then the people that are artists will have preference over, you know, people that are not artists, and that's sort of the preference piece of it. And that will get worked out through the lottery process also. And I have not done an artist preference before, and so I don't know exactly how that preference will be determined, but you know, our property management company understands this better. And but literally, you know, if you're an artist, then you get a preference over a non-artist. And we will have a public session around the lottery process and all of that sometime in likely in early June.
A follow-up question, I think I can answer what you've done.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of, it's preference meaning to try to pull it entirely reverse, and then next year.
Yes.
It's going to be more heavily diced for us.
No, so we were going to, for all the there's certain apartments that there won't be a preference for. There's a small number that won't have a preference, but almost all of them will have a preference. And for all of those, so let's just say there's 10, it's not, but let's just say there's 10 apartments that have an artist preference. If we have 10 artists, those are the 10 people that go in. If there's 800 other people that say they want to live there, it's the 10 people that are artists are chosen 1 through 10 first, and then they get to move in. So that's what it means to be an artist preference. So unlike race, gender, all sorts of other disability, there actually is a preference if you're an artist, in a way that there couldn't be a preference for you if you were of a certain race or age or.
One last follow-up, but just so Ben, you just mentioned that there are some that are not cited as artists. Housing, is that like 10%? Is it 50%?
It's about, it's about somewhere between 40 and 50 of the apartments will have an artist preference. And so the vast majority will have an artist preference. We're finalizing that, but yes.
I guess I've just been, being an artist, I was just putting if you wanted to have an artist community identity, I think pushing the percentage of non-artists too high is.
We completely agree with you. So we're working to make that happen, and it has to do with some of the funding that went in and how that funding gets hacked back, and is it possible to combine that funding with the artist preference? So that's the part that that's why I'm being a little squirrely here, but the vast majority of the funding will allow the artist preference. But that's where we completely agree. We would like to have 68 artists there. I think we're back to this side.
Yeah.
I think Hal was.
Just
must
a
be first.
point of information that everyone's gonna need to know the size of doorways. So if they're doing a sculpture, it has to be able to fit out of there.
Yes.
And the other thing is,
We're gonna have Mike Mulligan and their steam shovel. Is that what you're telling me, Hal?
Yep. Take the wall down, but also you have glass work that is stained glass, which doesn't require a lot of heavy equipment, where molded glass is different. And in metalwork, you can have some metalworking that you don't need major tools, but then you've got welding and blacksmithing that go to the extreme.
Yep. So Steve, the first point was that people need to know the dimensions so they can make sure their art will fit in and out. The second was that there's a big continuum between metalworking and glassworking, some of which needs specialized equipment and some of which does not.
Yep, no, I agree with all of that. And so to answer the question about, at least in the large auditorium space, the doors that go into that space are, full double doors, so those openings are, 6 feet or wider, and there's 3 sets of them going into that space. And then, the doors that go into people's apartments are wider than a normal door, and they need to be for, because the building is designed for universal design. So I think they're at least 36-inch wide doors into your apartment. They might even be slightly wider than that. So that's much wider than a normal residential door, but at least the doors going into the large auditorium space, are pretty wide. The issue is height, because those doors that enter the auditorium are underneath the balconies. So it's, I think the height of those doors are probably, I don't know, like 7.5, 8 feet tall, but they're at least 6 or more feet wide. So, we've definitely thought through that. And some of it is we can't change that, because this is a historic building, and we're using historic tax credits, so we can't just, change things that are controlled by Mass Historic and the National Park Service around some of the historic stuff. But the doors are pretty wide, at least going into the large spaces.
The problem they had at doing stuff at Monty Tech is they had a docks area to bring stuff in with a 10-foot door. But the doors going into the stage were only 7 foot.
Yeah.
That's Mike Mulligan. There we go.
Term limits to the amount of time they can keep it, which. And just on a person between CE and space and access to the resource. That's in the future here has been part of that conversation, or is that just once you move in, it's what you do?
I can take this one, Steve, because it's yes and no. The question is, are there term limits? And the answer is no. So because the apartments are affordable, there may be issues if people's, if you're a starving artist now, you're working in you're working in a restaurant and all those things, and you win the lottery, and now you're wealthy, your rent would change, but you wouldn't be evicted, and there's no term limits. Go ahead, Jessica.
I actually have 2 very different questions, because I didn't want to interrupt the flow, but just back to that general space, and you kind of answered this, but just, is there a secure, so if people want to leave their supplies, is there a secure space for them to store it, or would they have to bring it back to their live space if they had?
Again, yes, I think one of the things that we envisioned was having, sort of not traditional lockers, but space where people can lock things up. Some people may not need it, so they may just have a paintbrush and paints. They don't need a space to lock up, but other people may want, space. So that's a good, suggestion of, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So I'll make sure that we put that down, and there's definitely space in that larger, space. And then there are some smaller rooms that are just within that general area that we could build that storage into it, and and make it secure so that people can lock things up. The spaces, the large space will be, there'll be controlled access, so you'll need a key or a fob or something to get in there. So there'll be some level of security, but I think the answer is yes, definitely we'll be able to build some kind of secure lockers or space for people to lock things up.
A totally different question, but in terms of the certification process, and I think you did mention including local artists, but this is both a question, but also a recommendation, that it's not just institutional representation of the arts in Fitchburg, and that it represents all the arts, because I think with the museum having such a strong focus, that's an institution for one, and two, it's visual art, whereas we have theaters who have been here for 100 years too. We have people who, we have a history of literary arts, and a lot of people who not just work here, but work and live here. And I think if we want to create a good community, it's not just driven by the institutions. And I know the museum and the university give a lot to us, but something we hear a lot here is a lot of distrust in the institutions. And so I think if there could be a balance of all those perspectives as to what an artist is and what a community looks like, I think it's important to have equal focus from all that. With that, I'm trying to say that diplomatically, but I hope that's fair.
Yep,
Yeah.
good point. So I think some of it'll be, depends how, good point. So we're working on that stuff right now,
Okay.
and that's a good point to take into account.
Actually, it ties in with what I was saying past, because I was saying, okay, so this space, also community space, is speaking for people that live there, but as you're saying, there's so many other people too who are not going to be living there, who are also artists, interested in this community. Can we come up with some way to create a truly communal space? Everybody, maybe it's like an sort of indoor, outdoor cafe type annex to the museum or this building or somewhere that there's a commercial space to hang out and have coffee or wine or whatever, and hopefully would encourage more people to live there in that space to hang out, but also other people who would love to have to hang out with fellow artists in town would be like that.
Great point. This is not going to be for everybody. And so I think the more ideas we have for those things, the better off we are. I mean, this is a great example of this space wasn't here when we were designing that space, and there's lots of room for all sorts of different types of spaces. And it's actually one of the things before, I know we'll take as many questions as we have, but I do want, there is 2 or 3 slides I just want to show you at the end that relates back to some of the things that you're just raising right now. So don't do it now, but there's lots of room for creativity. We have libraries, we have city halls, we have universities, we have parks, we have streets, we have murals, we have all sorts of really creative artists who do things that I would never have ever thought of. And that's what makes, from a community development point of view, from an economic development point of view, people are valuing place now, right? If you want to buy something, you can go on Amazon and find the cheapest thing there and find exactly what you want, your size shoe, and that's how you buy things now. Not everybody, but many of us do it that way. But a place, an experience, you can't get that on, most of us can't get that on a computer. And that destination, that's something special that artists are helping to create here, whether it's visual artists, performing artists, musical artists, artists that all sorts of artists. And so I think this is the perfect thing. The Fitchburg arts community is not the answer to everything. It's one piece of it. And all these other things that's part of why we really put a lot of time into creating the art stewards, is because we realize there's a lot of intellectual capital and things that we don't know and that we can't build. It needs to come from people who are actually creating the art. So great point. And, it's part of what happened with Mill Street and other ideas, trying to put a stage in on Riverfront Park, what's going to happen to Low Park, right next door. All these are great places to think about how we can create great communal space for artists, because there's a lot more than 68 artists, and not all the artists are going to want to live there. Some people live in their own house and are very happy living there. Others, no matter what physical amenities we put in, are going to need a different physical amenity than what we put in the building. I think we're going where we.
Where's that the mouse?
I think
That's
that was
the
the mouse.
Okay.
We're going around this way. Yep.
So I just want to place this in a larger context here, because I think it's unfair to burden this project with all of our expectations. And I mean, you guys are doing an incredible amount, and you're very honorably saying, you know, we can take care of this part, and we're gonna deliberately leave that part, you know, to be resolved by the inhabitants, the occupants. That's really good. But with respect to where I see it fitting in, it's like if you bring the artists here, you bring their families. Like in a family of 3, there might be 1 artist, and so you might have a little kid, and you're going to have the spouse. Well, you're also, so in terms of congregating with the art community, that's what happens at Rise and Grind. That's what happens in the local economy. So I don't want to overburden this project with too many expectations. The point of this project is to help to be an engine for the larger community.
A building block.
Yes, that's an excellent point, and that's part of why. Jesse, Francisco, when did we start the Art Stewards? How many years ago?
5.
Yeah, it was one of the first steward classes that we did, is because we knew that, well, we don't have the building up there anymore. We know art is not about a building, it's about people. And we needed to build the intellectual capital to go along with the physical capital. Fitchburg really was lacking in physical capital, but it was, but we wanted the intellectual capital to grow during this time and not have it be, great, here's your building, now you guys show up. We wanted to have all these other cool things happening so that it would be ready. You know, we could hopefully just rent, from a selfish point of view, we just rent it up really fast, because there'd be a lot of artists who would want to say, wow, Fitchburg's a cool place, I'd like to live there. Right, that's selfishly what we were doing at, but from a community point of view, it was really about, a community development corporation is about people, it's not about buildings. And so we really wanted to bring that, create that thick weave of artists and not have it just be, back to Jesse's point, just the art museum, just the university. And at that point, I think the cultural alliance was sort of, it's been around for a long time, but it wasn't at its strongest. Let's just leave it that way. Yeah. I think we're going.
Result.
Yeah, there you go. So we wanted to just, there was a lot there. We just wanted to help invigorate. Yes, exactly.
That's all I'm saying. This is a great opportunity to stick some sort of cafe, you know, place in that area.
I didn't take it that way at all. I took it as exactly like, I'm celebrating what you guys are doing. That's part of why we're here, is because I know not everybody gonna move in, but we need artists, lots and lots of artists who live here, work here, do all those different things.
So I think it's where the Fitchburg is a pretty attractive place to live in, and projects like this only make it even more attractive. But that raises a concern that I've had, and I know some people are spoken to that had, and when the applications are ready to go, I've heard some people be concerned that we're gonna get like tons of like Boston people that just come right here and take them all up, and then because of service our community, you know, we track Boston nights. Is there any kind of checks and balances being considered to make sure that we're servicing like our local artists before, you know, like, because you made a comment before how, you know, it's attractive to live out here if you don't have to drive to Boston.
Yeah, Steve, I can take this one. This question is whether there's a local preference.
Yeah.
The answer is no. We would like to have a local preference. In some projects, we have been able to have a minor local preference, but part of what's happened with the local preferences is that some communities abuse them. And so it's a way to keep people out, not to let people in. And so the state is very, very, I don't know if they've completely banished them, but it's almost impossible. maybe there's one or two that are getting through, but basically they really crack down on them because a lot of white suburban communities would put in preferences, and it would mean that only white people could move in there. And so the state said, forget it. We're just, it's not the same in Fitchburg, that is a diverse community, but we can't figure out how. So they just said, that's the end of it from a fair housing perspective. There's no local preferences. So that's part of why we need to market here. It's part of why Steve and I are here tonight, is because we want to get the word out locally. That is one way that we can't create a preference, but we can tip the scales a little bit. We're not saying, we're still advertising in Boston. It's still a lottery. Everybody has access to it. But activating you guys to have your network will mean that hopefully people from Fitchburg and the local area will be able to move in.
You also said, Mark, you have income levels.
Right, I was gonna say
And
that.
someone coming in from Boston that makes $200,000 or $300,000 a year coming in here as an artist is different than someone that's making $10,000 to $20,000 looking for an art place.
Correct. That would be true. If you're wealthy, you won't be able to live here whether you're from Fitchburg or from Boston or New York.
Before I just lose that thought, but the way we can all act on that, Newview has been, that postcard that I handed out, Newview, I think, has on their social media that in Instagram or Facebook icon. So go home and share it to all your networks, like email it, post it, make it viral, and send it to your local people so that Newview gets inundated with people in our circles.
Yep, that'd be great. So let me take up, can I just take the last few slides that I wanted to show you about, because it gets back to this community issue, and then we can take more questions. I'm happy to stay as long as there are questions, and I won't speak for Steve. He can come back another time. So I think these are just a few slides of actually what's going on. That's the actual, Steve, why don't you narrate these slides? I forgot that we had
Sure.
these slides.
So go back. Yep. So this is, clearly showing construction that's going on. This was the end of last year. But a lot of progress has been made. Like I said at the beginning, the construction is more than 50% complete, which is awesome. So next slide, Francisco, if you could. So this is showing the inside of the auditorium facing the stage. The rendering was facing the other direction. So all of the stuff that's piled in there is salvaged historic materials, wood flooring, trim, window moldings, all of that. So right now that's a place to store all of that. But this is a good example of seeing the stage and seeing the open space. And a lot of the flooring will get reinstalled, in different places of the building. But the main place that the original wood flooring is going back into is the auditorium. And that's required by historic, so it will be hardwood flooring in that space. Next slide. I can't remember what's on the next one.
Now I realize that we put that hardwood flooring there, we're just going to be allowing it to be painted over.
It's okay. It's okay. So this is just more construction work. This is masonry work going on at the stables building. There was a lot of masonry work that needed to happen there. So, the whole building actually had to be repointed. So that's just showing a mason working on, some masonry work. Next slide.
Sorry, just on that slide too, one of the cool things about that is you could actually see the word city stable on there. And some of you may have been on one of the original tours that we did where we did it, and you really couldn't see that. So it's cool that the architects and the design team, Steve, and how got that back up there. I think that's and going into the stables is very cool too. Next slide.
This is showing more masonry work being done at the annex building. If you've driven by, those two large tented areas have been taken down mostly now, but that allowed them to continue doing masonry work throughout the winter, which was critical for us to keep this project on schedule. It's amazing, the condition of these three buildings was they were all in pretty bad shape, and it's amazing that we're still on schedule as far as construction goes. You know, they started construction in the end of May of 2023 and will be done, you know, the very end of this year and early next year. So the contractor has done a phenomenal job of staying on top of things and being creative about ways to be able to continue to do masonry work in a cold winter. So next slide. So Mark, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I just put this slide in because you can see there are a lot of people. This was at the groundbreaking, and I've been to a lot of projects, and I've never seen so many people support a project like this one. Most projects that we go to, even if people like them, the only people who come out at the zoning hearings are the neighbors, and they're coming out because they don't want change. They're afraid about what's going to happen. And that has not happened on this project. We've had so much support from the very first time we broached the subject, and to have this many people, this isn't a ribbon cutting. There's nothing to see. It was just cold. It was just cold. It was sunny, but it was cold. And this many people stayed to the end. And that's what it takes to get a project like this done. Steve and Ann have done a tremendous job to raise the money, actually close the project. It was not easy to close this project. It was the hardest project we've ever closed. And I didn't do any of it. These guys worked literally day and night for months to put all the financing in place and make sure that we could draw on it at the right time to be able to build it. And we couldn't have done it without all the support from not only the funders, but mostly from the people of Fitchburg who really supported the project and came out and convinced the city to make the extra calls, put up the extra money to make this project go. And so I know at least some of you were there. We really appreciate all your support and all your questions, because that's what makes a good project, is your support and us being able to listen and hopefully respond to some of the suggestions. Even if we can't do it all, it's really important to have the questions. So to go back, yes, we'll continue the dialogue so we can make sure that the place is going to be something that we want, which is we want it to be a place that people who are passionate about arts and culture want to live. Maybe that you can't do your particular art there. Maybe you still have to get something else, but it's an affordable place. It's a clean place. You'll be a place with some great culture. You'll be with other artists who are talking about the same things. You'd be able to maybe, I don't quite know exactly how, if you needed a kiln and there wasn't a kiln there, what you could do. But what we really want is that place where people feel like, this is my home. This is the place that I want to live. I want to come back and I want to raise my kids here, or care for my parents here, or live by myself here. And I want to be with this other group of people, because we don't want it to be just another apartment building. We want it to be a place where we are creating that culture and where artists feel comfortable and can do your stuff that I would never imagine, but that I appreciate once it's done. So next slide. So one of the questions that I have as a director is, does this stuff work? Like, is it working? Are we making a difference? Not are we building a building, not are we creating a studio, but are we really changing what's happening? Is the community changing? What's the outcome, not the output? What are people, is this becoming a place where arts and culture is going to thrive? Are we really building on the assets? Are we really limiting the liabilities? Are people still going to see Fitchburg streets as narrow and dense? Are they going to see them as a great place to walk? Wow, this is a great walkable neighborhood. Are people going to see these vacant buildings as vacant buildings that are just vacant? Are they going to say, oh, wow, I could put an art studio in there. I could put a bike shop in there. I could put a coffee shop there. This is a place that I want to invest my time and money. I want to put a business there. So it's really hard to know if it's working. So one of the tools that we use is something called the Community Impact Measurement Survey. So every 3 years, we go out and we interview 200 people who live in the North of Main neighborhood, this neighborhood right here. So this is Main Street, this is Highland, this is Mechanic, and that's the boundary of the census tracts up there, the block groups. So it sort of goes, I think along Simon Street, or I don't remember, if not Simon's, just above Simon's there. Right near Linnea's house. Okay, so we go out, we talk to 200 randomly selected people. Next slide. And we ask them about 5 different things. How's engagement in neighborliness? What are the physical conditions and attractiveness? Does it look nice? Is it safe? How do the buildings look? And, would you recommend this as a place to live? And we asked, I think it's about 25 or 30 questions. I'm looking at Francisco, who actually did all this work. And this is sort of, we haven't gone public with everything, but I wanted to give you guys a preview of what it is. So we've been doing the same survey for 10 years, since 2013 to now, so a little bit more than 10 years. So we have some longitudinal studies to say what's actually happening. So residents report a high neighborliness among community residents, and that has increased over time. The place has gotten more attractive. So they're satisfactory, they're attractive, they show pride, they positively contribute to the image of the neighborhood, and the conditions of the building have increased over the past decade. Safety. This is one area we could do a little better on. So most residents feel safe in the community during the day, but they're more concerned at night, and residents' perceptions of safety at night has not improved over 10 years. And the conditions of the observed buildings has improved substantially between 2013. So, and here's the piece about the, over half the survey report feeling safe walking in the community during the day, but far fewer feel that way at night. Next slide. So survey respondents are satisfied with the neighborhood and are confident in the future, and satisfaction has increased between 2013 and 2023. And also residents feel that they can make a positive difference in the community, and a majority are willing to get involved in their community. So those trends are also increasing over time as well. Next slide. Sorry, I took out the slide. I took out this slide, but I'm going to tell you what it said. We asked people, what do you think about what's happening downtown? Because one of the things we found over this area was that so much of what was connected to residents who live in the neighborhood was what was happening down on these streets here. And because that's a huge amenity if you're living within that neighborhood. And 60% of the people said they were very satisfied with the results of what was happening in downtown, and specifically bringing arts and culture to Fitchburg. So that was a new question that we asked for this year, right, Francisco? So we're really excited about that, and this we will be rolling out. We'll be publicizing the results of the community impact measurement survey. So Francisco and Nash will be working on that. We haven't quite gotten there quite yet. We're still finalizing it, but I wanted to give you that sneak peek. Both that I don't know why I took out that slide, which was why I wanted to do it, but that sense that people really do like what's happening downtown. So two-way Main Street, shops coming in, and people feel connected to it. One of the things that we don't want to do, and I think this came up somewhere else, is we don't want to end up with, oh great, we had an impact on Main Street, Elm Street, and Boulder Drive, and then after that, nothing's going on, right? We want to make sure that the work that we're doing is really integrated into the community. And so that's part of why we go out and we survey the residents, because it's not just about this Main Street, it's about people who live in the neighborhood too. And it's our 45th anniversary, so that was what I think the last slide was. So happy to take a few questions on this too. I'm also happy to, Jesse and Francisco, if you want, I'm happy to end and stay as long as people want. I don't know what time we normally end here. 8, okay, so I'm happy to stay till after 8, but I can take questions till 8, so start,
Tom,
go this way and then go that way, and go reverse order.
I'm sorry, you might have answered this question already, but, do you have, or do you plan to have a data map on where specific answers are coming from in the work domain community? Things sort of breakdown of who said, feel, like improvements are happening, so.
That's a really interesting question. I think we can get some of that data, so we were particularly interested in
Thank you so much.
Yep, bye Deb. We're particularly interested in that question as to why people may not feel safe at night. One of the things we found from talking to our other colleagues was that sometimes this relates to where streetlights are. In another community in North Carolina, it related to sidewalks. So the issue was, the reason, when I read that question, I'll say, why do you not feel safe at night? Oh, it must be crime. Well, it turned out that that's not always what's in people's mind. So in North Carolina, they found out at this community that there was no place to walk. And so they didn't feel safe at night because they couldn't walk because they thought they're going to get hit by a car, or they're going to be walking on somebody's private property and they would be trespassing. So, so we are going to try to, at least for that safety question, that's one of the things that we want to try to ask and see if we can dig a little bit more. But we're not planning to publicize like a heat map that shows where it comes from. We might be able to do it for a few specific questions, and that's one of the ones we're interested in.
Perfect.
What you have created is a forward momentum.
What you have created is a forward
We have.
momentum. What we have created, yes,
Together,
yes.
like I hear, my phrase I started with the stewards is, together, we're stronger.
Yes, that is what we're doing, and it's been a lot of you, and I know a lot of people have worked on helping to create this vision together, and it's one of the things about having this grassroots artist community, going back to your question, Jesse, about it's not just about an institution. It's really about ordinary residents feeling good about things and pushing and making change, and change is not always easy. Right, just think about 2A Main Street. There was a lot of trepidation about turning Main Street back into 2A, right? And we tried the 1-lane Main Street, and that didn't work. And you know, it seems easy when it works, but it isn't always easy, and change is hard. Change is really, really hard. So I appreciate that. It really is about everybody coming together and asking these hard questions and working together. Ellen.
First of all, I would just like you to know that I am so grateful that I'm here, and that I am now much more, I know so much more about what you're doing. I've always had faith in you, Mark, and I'm saying that in front of all of you because I've known him since he came here. And I'm 88 years old. I
Was our first, I think you were the first downtown coordinator, Ellen, weren't you?
Without a title.
And without getting paid very much.
But what I want to say to you is that my husband, God rest his soul, used to tell people that he never had any competition except the city of Fitchburg. From the time I was a little girl, I've always thought that my parents didn't come here. I was trained to really appreciate where it was, trained to look up, you know, walking along Main Street at the two buildings, all those things since I was a kid. And I've always, I've always known that the potential was here. And there have been times when we've had, new direction and so forth, but they never seemed to last because people aren't here. Well, you're going to be here if you're not going to be here. And I am absolutely thrilled. It's almost like a gift. And I wish all the luck, and if there's ever anything I can do to help, please let me know. So we time you have seen a lot of things.
Well, I'm beginning, I have always advocated Fitchburg. And to tell you the truth, I've had to agree that Warren Square has come alive and, you know, historically and so forth. And the Upper Common is wonderful. And I'm involved in the historical commission, and we have 6 historic districts on Main Street, and it includes, you're the 6th. Your whole, and Mark's project is like the anchor. It's fabulous. And I'm just thrilled.
Well, we are,
Ellen went to be a frown.
Yes, I did. I knew there was something I wanted to tell you, but you wouldn't have known. You all know Mike Barnacle? You know who Mike Barnacle is? Well, Mike Barnacle's aunt Helen was my music teacher at Leah Brown. You know?
Yep, yeah, it's what.
Okay, we can do with that my kids more. I'm sure up to long before me. And we also had Mr. Bouvier, and he was more a general arts person. And I think he was involved in both Leah Brown and the high school. I'm not absolutely sure about that. But Miss Barnacle was also the theater director. We had wonderful programs when I was at Leah Brown. We used to have a variety review. One of them was that different kids with different ethnic backgrounds, because this is a very, as a matter of fact, we had a lot of neighborhood elementary schools, and at some point we all, you know, we get to the 7th grade, we came to be a Brown from all over the city. It was very exciting. I had my first grade friend sat across from me at a table. I'd never known anybody who was great before. But Miss Barnacle was just an amazing woman, and she made sure that we had wonderful programs and was so appreciative of art and things like that. I just wanted to tell you that you're going to be living where there was an artistic soul. Yeah.
thank you. Well, we're really appreciative of all your help. And I think one of the things that goes back to all of you is that this is our 3rd mayor who's in a row who's been supportive of this project. So Mayor Wong really got it going. We had quite a discussion with the city council about what to do with this project, what to do with this building, because they had to do it and it passed. But we've had much more, but since then we've really just had sort of unanimous support, and a lot of that is because of all of what you guys are doing, and a lot of it is you can see it too. You can see the murals, and so every time a city councilor or a planning board member or a voter goes by, they see those murals, or resident, they see those murals and they say, wow, I like this place. And I think that that's part of what is creating this, and why you know, 3 mayors in a row have been supportive of the project, and not just of the Fitchburg arts community, but supportive of making Fitchburg sort of a hub of arts and culture, which has been which was not an easy thing to explain back in the day. People were, what want artists for? And it's really because of all of your art that you're producing, and I don't just mean visual arts, all the arts that you're doing, that people have gotten behind the project. So, and helped to transform Fitchburg. So thank you all very much for your enthusiasm, your art, your energy, your questions. And I should make sure I'm here when Nick comes so I can learn the answer to some of these other questions here. And I also just want to one last time acknowledge Steve and the whole team that is really making this stuff go. It is many, many hours every week devoted just exclusively to this project, to satisfying the lenders, to working with the contractor, to getting the contractor paid, to answering lots of really difficult questions about how are we gonna actually build the thing? Multiple, you know. What are we doing with the roof at this building? What are we doing with, how much brick pointing are we really gonna do over here? How are we gonna make the building more resilient? In addition to all the questions that you guys had today, just building the building has been a huge amount of work with 3 different buildings, 3 different heating and cooling systems, 3 roofs, parking, all the rest of it. So Steve, thank you to you and to Anne and Flor and everybody and Jim, everybody else who's on that real estate team that's making all this stuff go.
Are they all in the same area? They spread out? Oh, okay, so it is all kind of one. I think
Yep.
now